All right, I would say like 90% of my work is solo filmmaking. And by solo filmmaking, I just mean me, myself, and my camera. Not much setup, no assistance, no gaffing, no lighting, just pretty much myself, my subject, whatever I'm filming, and my camera. I would say though that with a pretty minimal setup, I think I've got my package and my overall system pretty smooth for both client work and just personal YouTube, Instagram work. I just want to make a video today talking about my perfect solo filmmaking setup. Basically what I pack in my video. Most of the stuff that I want to talk about is pretty much all in one bag, and that's what I carry on with me when I shoot, and it's a pretty seamless setup. I'll leave everything I talk about in this video down below. If you have any questions on anything specific, leave them in the comments. These gear review videos are always fun. I enjoy watching them on YouTube, and I hope you guys pick up a thing or two. All right, so quickly, one thing that I overlooked for a number of years is the bag that you use when you go out to shoot. I always just use like a regular backpack, stuffed all my stuff in there. If I needed stuff, I just like packaged it or put it in like little smaller bags within my backpack. But a couple years ago, Peace put me onto this brand and I really love them. They're called Wandered, and I use the Provoke 31 liter backpack by them. I also have a 41 liter backpack by them. It's an all black, basically water weather resistant backpack that has packing cubes or dividers to help safely store all of your cameras, your lenses, everything. I've tested a lot of backpacks over the years, and this one in particular, I just love it because it's super easy to unzip and quickly pull out anything that you need. There's even like a little side compartment to pull out cameras from the side as you're on the go. That and the top area where you unroll the backpack to kind of expand its capacity is really useful when you're going ahead and like packing extra small gear, small items. I'm not gonna go super into detail about every aspect, but it's just got a lot of compartments. It's super useful. I'm sure a lot of like in-depth reviews about it on YouTube. This bag, not sponsored at all, is just a great bag. I've been using it every day. I recommend it to my friends after Peace recommended it to me, and they all love it. So, you know, take that for what you will. Next up, let's talk about the camera body that I use for almost all of my work, as well as the specific lenses that I take on shoots for both client work and personal work. The camera, I'm sure you know by now, is the Sony FX3. And the reason why I love this camera so much is its size factor. It's loved by so many people just because it's such a small, compact body. You can shoot 4K, 10-bit, all of that. Like basically anything that you need within a small, really compact body, you get. My favorite feature is the dual native ISO. I think before the firmware or whatever I have on right now is the bottom base ISO is 640 and the second base ISO, so basically just like a super clean ISO, is 12,800. And that's honestly overkill. A lot of times what I find, even at like nighttime, what I'm doing is I'm slapping on the ND filter on top of my lens to get that like shallow depth of field, but also to not be like overexposed at night. That's like crazy to say. The other amazing feature that I don't see a lot of people speaking about is the dual SD card slot holder. Now, when I've been shooting on a single SD card on client shoots, I've actually had SD cards break on me and I've like lost all of my content that I've shot. And what I like to do on this specific camera is I actually like to record to both SD card slots simultaneously. That way I have an active backup as I'm shooting, kind of just like peace of mind. And that's one thing I love about this camera is that you can shoot and record to SD card slot 1 and SD card slot 2 at the same time. So you have 2 copies of your footage that you've been shooting, and it's just an amazing feature. I've got the FX3 on a small rig cage. I think I got it for like $100 or something like that. It's a really nifty cage. You can go ahead and mount this. I think the bottom of it is like an Arca Swiss where you can just like easily mount it on any tripod without having to like add on another mount. And having a cage allows for you to go ahead and adjust it onto like vertical mounts really easily, really quickly. You can put this on my RS3 gimbal, no problem. And it's just amazing to go ahead and like add on additional features, additional mounts as you're on the go. The other camera that I use, but I don't necessarily carry with me every single day, is the Sony A7C II. This camera is an amazing dual shooter. You can shoot really nice raw photos, as well as it basically has the same sensor as the Sony FX3 minus the dual second ISO. I think it goes from like 800 to 3200 rather than 12,800. But even that is like super useful. It's half or even less the price of the Sony FX3, and you still get that beautiful 4K 10-bit footage, which is amazing to grade. And it's oftentimes a camera I use for my personal work. When I need to shoot client work, I'll stick to the FX3 just because of the dual SD slots. Next up is lens selection. And when you're a solo shooter, it's really key to go ahead and pick your lens choices based on the scenario you're gonna be. I like to minimize the amount of times that I'm going between different lenses, or I like to kind of flow my shot list or whatever I have in my head based off of whatever lens that I'm shooting with, and then get all the shots out of the way, move on to the next, move on to the next 5.3 lenses and kind of like knock everything out that way. If you're trying to minimize the amount of time you're swapping between lenses, I feel like that just makes the whole experience of shooting a lot more fun, a lot more streamlined, and you're not wasting as much time fiddling around with like lens swaps. All this to say that I like to basically limit myself to ideally 2, but oftentimes 3 main lenses that I take on shoots. Now, as a solo shooter, the base 2 lenses that I use are always the same. I always bring a super wide lens and also a prime lens. So oftentimes recently I've been shooting on the 10mm Laowa f2.8 autofocus lens. This lens is incredible. I've done a whole review video about it. I'll link it somewhere here, but honestly, it's an incredible wide lens. An alternate would be the Sony 10-18 f4 lens. I just like the 10mm f2.8 full frame lens. It's so useful for specifically super wide shots, environmental shots when you don't have much space. As a solo shooter, oftentimes you're in unpredictable locations or you don't have control over kind of like the environment that you're shooting in. So having this variability, this flexibility in your lens widths comes in super clutch. The second lens that I always bring is the 24mm f1.4 prime lens. Now, I like this lens a lot because it's still extremely wide, but you get a nice shallow depth of field, especially when you pop on like an ND filter outdoors, and the image quality is just stunning. Autofocus G Master lenses paired with the FX3, the autofocus is super fast, super sharp, never misses, and it's a super useful lens when you're shooting solo. I shoot a lot of fashion, a lot of portraiture, and I like the look of the 24mm lens. I think alternatively, if you were to swap out this lens, you could pop on a 35mm f1.4 and you'd still get sort of basically the same feeling. I just think that the super wide with a prime is a great combination. The third lens that I oftentimes bring is the 50mm f1.2. This lens is a bit overkill. I think if you're looking for like really shallow depth of field, like almost medium format looking video, it's amazing. I was on a Lacoste shoot a couple years back and one of the videographers was also using a 50mm 1.2, and in the low light, it was just like a gorgeous looking lens. So oftentimes I'll use that as my third lens. The other lens that I like to use as my third lens is like a far zoom lens. So like the 70-300, a lot of people use like the 70-200. I don't use or bring this lens unless I know that specific shot is something that I need, because these lenses are so large and so heavy. As a solo filmmaker, you're really trying to maximize the weight to gear kind of like ratio. So if a lens is super heavy, don't bring it unless you really know that you're going to need it. I oftentimes don't even bring a third lens. I'll just stick to the 10mm and the 24mm. But if I need that kind of like punched in look or maybe like a zoom, I'll bring the 50mm or the 70-300. As you're looking at the gear that keeps you prepped and ready for a shoot, it's really important to think about your shot list, how you're gonna plan things out. And that's a key thing when I think about choosing which gear that I'm going to bring out on a solo filmmaking trip. When you're on your own, having a solid plan is just as important as having the right gear. And that's where the sponsor of today's video, Milanote, comes in. As a solo filmmaker, having a clear vision is everything. And that was especially important in a recent Lenovo campaign that Peace and I shot for my socials. This project had us capturing a variety of dynamic shots across Tokyo, experimenting with creative transitions, and pulling tonal inspiration for my post-production from some creative projects I've seen recently. Milanote is a tool for organizing creative projects, and for this shoot, it became my ultimate pre-pro hub. I used it to build a detailed storyboard and shot list, mapping out transitions like this through the lens effect, where I pushed into the camera lens and transitioned to a new location. With Milanote, I could visually lay out the entire sequence, adding reference images and notes for every angle and transition. For example, planning out the final shot with me silhouetted with the trains in the background. Everything was done in pre-production on my Milanote board, just ensuring that I didn't miss anything on shoot day. I just love how visually easy it is to manage everything in a mood board. I can just click and drag things, my reference images, my gear checklist, lighting notes, all on the same board. And then I can also create subboards. So for this specific shoot, I have a subboard with my shot list and script. And so I can go ahead and click on that and reference that on shoot day. So I just know exactly what shots need to go with which line. As a solo filmmaker, this kind of organization is invaluable. It helps me translate ideas from my studio directly into the real world with confidence. And it takes all the guesswork out of pre-production, letting me focus on creating something I'm proud of. There's over 100 built-in templates that Milano offers to make it easy to get started on a variety of different projects. And the best part, Milano is completely free with no time limit. Click the link in the description to sign up and start planning your next creative project today. Now that we've covered the planning stage, let's dive back into the gear and talk about some further pieces. All right, believe it or not, I actually bring a gimbal with me almost all the time, and it fits inside that 31-liter backpack. And the gimbal that I love to use is the DJI RS series. Specifically, I use the RS3 Pro. I've used the RS2 pretty extensively in the past, but I think anything past the RS2 is a great choice. For solo filmmaking, a lot of work that I do is kind of like fashion oriented for client work, and also just like personal work. I like to do a lot of transitions, a lot of speed ramps. That's where a gimbal comes in super handy. The RS3 you can break down into multiple pieces to help store quicker, and it's just a really powerful gimbal in a really small form factor, which is why I love to bring it either deconstructed or just like kind of half deconstructed and toss that in my bag so I have it at all times. The other piece of stabilization I like to use is a tripod, and I like to use a really light tripod. The one that I use right now is the Siri Travel X tripod. That might not actually be the name, but it's a ridiculously light tripod that I use all the time, just because you can go ahead and pop it down, set it up really quickly, and then if you need like a little extra weight to keep it kind of grounded, there's a little hook where you can like attach a bag or something to keep it a little extra weight. Super quick to set up and super easy to use. And finally, on the main rig, the only other thing that I typically attach is the Sony EC-M1 microphone. The Sony microphone is super useful because there's no cords. You basically just attach it to the electronic hot shoe on top of the FX3, the A7C II, and you've got a bunch of different options to pick up either directional audio, it's kind of like spatial stereo audio, and the quality, I think you just like set it to automatic and it automatically makes sure that it doesn't peak. I've used it extensively now for, I don't know how long it's been out, but for months, and I've never had an issue with it. It's super strong, and mainly it's just really useful because I've had microphones in the past where the audio jack like wasn't plugged in properly all the way, or for whatever reason, like there was just like a connection issue and the audio I've gotten back is like super crunchy and just like unusable. This microphone, if you just have it on top of your camera and just like twist to tighten it, I've never had any issues, and it's super useful. So when you're thinking about like solo filmmaking, you want a very small, compact microphone. This one fits the bill and it's super easy to use. So I always have it with my kit. The only other gear that I use for audio are sometimes the Rode wireless microphones, kind of like the lavalier microphone setup where you can attach it to the top of your camera and then you just like lav yourself up and you can do like audio from distances or like clear talking head portions outdoors. It's a super useful microphone. It comes in like 2 small carry cases and they're really easy to use. So that's another thing I like to toss in my bag and have at all times. Now you might have noticed that I don't run around with a monitor, and so a little different than most people. I actually don't. I think like monitors are just super bulky, super annoying to set up and just kill a lot of space. When you're running as like a solo filmmaker, solo run and gun kind of videographer, then having a monitor can help, but I think like the monitor on the flip out screen is more than enough for me to kind of understand like my framing. If I need an additional monitor, whether that be to help show like clients what I'm shooting, or whether that be just like myself on my phone kind of monitoring like what I'm actually getting in my camera, I use the Monitor Plus app. The Monitor Plus app is actually a free app that you can download, and it connects via Bluetooth to your camera. You just gotta like read the QR code in your menu and it automatically sync with your camera in real time. It's really useful. I don't see a lot of people talking about it. It's a great app. If you pay for the pro version, you can actually add your custom LUTs. So the free version, you can only see the log footage. You can go ahead and add your own custom conversion LUT. So it's basically like a mirror of what you see on the flip out screen of your camera. Super useful. You can connect it like even on an iPad. So when I have like client shoots, I just have the client hold an iPad and just they can see clearly what's going on in my camera. And I'm just going ahead and just shooting as I go. That kind of wraps up the main rig. You can call it a rig, but I'm shooting like a really minimal format just because I like the small form factor and the ease of use versatility. A couple other things that I use that really make my filmmaking process really streamlined are sometimes I'll bring this, I think it's like a Zhiyun, it's called a 20M light or something. It's a really small compact light that just gives you a little bit extra punch when you need it. I don't use it very often, but sometimes I'll just pack it in for night shoots if you need like a little extra punch of light. It's an RGB light, so you can change the colors, you can change the modes, just gives you a little bit of extra fill. Super useful, and I just like it because it's battery powered and it's really small, fits in your backpack. For BTS capture, one of my favorite things is this weird like chest MagSafe rig I found on Amazon. There's a bunch of different sellers that create this exact same model, but it's basically like a magnetic kind of holder that you can place on your chest to get a really cool POV angle using your iPhone. I use this a lot for reels, and it's really simple, really useful to use like on the go to capture BTS content. I've done this before, like I've shot with like a GoPro strapped to my head. You look ridiculous. This thing, you don't look as ridiculous, and you can also shoot directly to your phone, which is super useful. So I just like pop it right on my chest. You can like unclip it, pack it in your backpack. It molds, it's malleable, super useful. Additionally, a couple other like quirky accessories that I use for my filmmaking. First is I like to carry around a really small handy cam. So one of my favorites is the Sony DSC TX1 Cybershot. This thing is really easy to use, is really useful. It's so small and you can basically record just on the go stuff. It looks really kind of like VHS vintage style CCD sensor, all that beautiful imperfection that people love. You don't need one of those additional monitors to like record to a micro SD card. Records directly to micro SD card straight from the camera. I have it in my bag, pop it in there. If I need like B-roll, B-cam shots, then I'll use it for a little vintage look. This PGY Tech shoulder strap has been a game changer since Tatsuki recommended it to me. It's basically a shoulder strap that you clip onto your bag, either a shoulder bag or your backpack, and you can just slide in your camera directly onto your body. And as you're like walking around between shots, you don't have to like, you know, put your camera on a shoulder strap, or you don't have to put your camera like, you have to hold it. You can just slap it onto your left or right chest area and it holds it super sturdy. When you need it, you just hold it and pull out your camera or unclip it. It's really useful and it's become a staple favorite of mine. So I always have it kind of attached to my backpack at all times. I've been using kind of only one set of ND filters recently just because they're super fun to use, and it's the Freewell system. I have the 1 to 5 stop, 6 to 9 stop, and there's also like a newer version which has like a 3 to 7 stop. I think these are just really easy to pop on. They're versatile and they give me a really clean image, and that's really important for when you're like that shallow depth of field outdoors. SD cards, I love the ProGrade ones. The other Sony Tough cards are ones that I would love to use, but they're just way too expensive. So I think like a great middle ground are these ProGrade cards. I think I have two 512 gigabyte or 256, it might be 256 cards in both slots at all times, and never had any issues. And finally, I carry around a little air blower that I use between lens swaps. I also have like extra batteries in the additional compartments of my backpack, but pretty much what I've spoken about today, I don't have all of that necessarily all at the same time at all times, but for the most part, I would say like 90% of the gear that I just listed, I have in my bag at all times, bar like the gimbal is basically the one that I'll either bring or won't bring, but everything else, use it almost daily. If you have any questions on any of that gear, again, feel free to leave me a question in the comments below. If you have any recommendations for fellow solo filmmakers, creatives out there, again, leave those in the comments below. I'd love to see new gear that you guys use or would highly recommend. Always on the lookout for cool and interesting new things. Thanks for watching again, and I'll see you guys in the next one.